In this day and age, everything should be fact-checked. Why should we believe in the Bible? For instance, the Bible exhorts us in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 19. Peter tells us, "We also have the prophetic message as something completely reliable, and you will do well to pay attention to it, as to a light shining in a dark place, until the day dawns and the morning star rises in your hearts." Morning star is pointing to Jesus. Now, this verse claims that the prophecies are reliable and we should pay attention to them. But are they reliable? How can we be sure? For those of us that rely on science and math, how much evidence does the Bible provide regarding its reliability? The Bible contains hundreds of prophecies. But can a person who relies on science examine the probability of these prophecies? Could such an analysis provide enough logical reasoning to prove to someone who is a skeptic that indeed the Bible is reliable? If you are interested in a mathematical probability analysis to answer these questions, this program is for you. This program is also dedicated to the youth in Iran, and credit should be given to the late pastor, author, and engineer Chuck Missler and Koinonia House for the information provided in the video with this link. It is not an exaggeration if you have heard that there are hundreds and hundreds of prophecies in the Bible. From Genesis, the first book, to Revelation, the last book, the Bible contains prophecies related to nations, countries, and people. Iran is included. To get an idea of the amount of information in the 66 books that make up the Bible, you can Google the number of words in the Bible. For the well-known King James Version, it gives you a number slightly higher than 783,000 words. It is estimated that 1/3 of the Bible is prophecies. To be conservative, even when I reduce this to 1/5, you can estimate the number of words related to prophecies in the Bible is over 156,000. For instance, in relation to Iran, there are many prophecies in the book of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. Many of these prophecies have already occurred, and there are still some that are yet to occur. If you haven't seen the program in this channel entitled, "What Does the Bible Say About Persia?" I recommend you watch it, as it will go over prophecies related to Iran in detail. Also, for those of you who may question the authenticity of the Bible, I recommend you watch the video entitled, "Is the Bible Distorted?" But since Jesus is the central figure in the entire Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, the Bible has over 300 prophecies written in the Old Testament related to this unique Messiah. For those of you who may not know, the Old Testament part of the Bible starts with Moses from some 1500 years before Christ and ended with Malachi, that came some 400 years before Christ. In this program, we'll start by reviewing the probability of occurrence of only 8 of these prophecies occurring about one particular individual. In Micah chapter 5, verse 2, we read, But you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you are little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me," that is to God, "the one," this is pointing to that particular individual, "the one to be ruler in Israel, whose going forth are from the old, from everlasting." Now, how many people you know that was born in Bethlehem? And what is the probability of anyone, say, being born in Bethlehem at any one time? Let's just use the time of Jesus. And based on Google, the population of Bethlehem at that time was only 300. And Google also tells us that the world population then was 300 million. So the probability of anyone being born there is equal or less than 300 divided by 300 million. That is being conservative. So P is 1 over 10 to the power of 6. By the way, the fulfillment of this prophecy regarding Jesus is recorded in Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verse 1. The second prophecy we will review is in Zechariah, chapter 9, verse 9, which says, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding on a donkey." In the old days, kings always rode on horses, not donkeys. But the scripture tells us this person is presented to Israel as king and is lowly, riding on a donkey. So how many have presented themselves as king to Jerusalem, riding on a donkey? None that we know of, except for Jesus. But let's be generous and say the probability of such an event is 1 in 100. By the way, you can find the fulfillment of this prophecy in Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21, verses 2 and 5. The Bible tells us that one of the 12 disciples of Jesus, named Judas Iscariot, makes a pact with the corrupt religious leaders of that day to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. For that money, Judas agreed to show these religious leaders where Jesus is. Some 500 years before this event, Zechariah prophesied the conversation between Judas Iscariot and these false religious leaders regarding this agreement in Zechariah chapter 11, verse 12. "Then I," that is Judas, "said to them," them is Jewish false leaders, "If it is agreeable to you, give me my wages, and if not, refrain." So they weighed out for my wages 30 pieces of silver. Now, looking at the probability of this prophecy, we need to ask how many people have been betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. Let's say the probability is just 1 in 1,000. We're being extremely generous, as 1 in 10 million is much closer to the real answer. And you can find the fulfillment of this prophecy in Matthew chapter 26, verse 15. So what happened to Judas after betraying Jesus? Gospel of Matthew chapter 27 records after Jesus was crucified, Judas felt so guilty that he took the 30 pieces of silver back to the religious leaders in the temple and threw the money on the floor and left the place and then went and hung himself. The religious leaders didn't want to use this blood money, so they decided to buy the potter's field with it, to bury the corpse of strangers. Ironically, this field still remains desolate today. But even more ironically, this event is prophesied in both Zechariah and Jeremiah. In Zechariah chapter 11, verse 13, we read, "And the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter. That princely price they set on me." This is, they set on the Lord. "So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them into the house of the Lord for the potter." Let's look at the parameters in this prophecy. We have price is 30 pieces of silver. We have location of the transaction is the house of the Lord, the temple. And also, who ends up with the money? The potter. What is the probability of these key factors to occur randomly together? It's probably in the 1 in millions. But let's be generous and say it's only 1 in 100,000. The Bible tells us on the 3rd day after crucifixion, Jesus was resurrected. We learned that on one occasion, Jesus shows up where his disciples had gathered, but one of them, named Thomas, was not there. But then when Thomas comes, Jesus was gone. The disciples tell Thomas that they have seen Jesus and they have seen Jesus' pierced hands. Thomas could not believe. Later on, Jesus shows up again, and this time Thomas is there. What happens next is in John chapter 20, verse 27. "Then he," that is Jesus, "said to Thomas, 'Reach your finger here and look at my hands, and reach your hand here and put it into my side. Do not be unbelieving, but believing.'" Thomas, who knew that the Old Testament speaks as the Messiah to also be God, responds this way in the next verse 28. "And Thomas answered and said to him, 'My Lord and my God.' And we read in verse 29, Jesus said to him, 'Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed.'" So this event was prophesied in Zechariah chapter 13, verse 6, which says, "And one will say to him," that is to Jesus, "What are these wounds between your arms?" Then he will answer, "Those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends." Now, how many people, taken at random, have been wounded in their hands in the house of their friends? Let's be generous again and say 1 in 1,000. The Bible tells us that when Jesus was arrested to be crucified, he made no defense. This was because his mission and agreement with his Father was to come down to earth, to go on the cross to pay for my sins and yours. So in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he was arrested, Peter, one of his disciples, wanted to intervene and defend Jesus. And Jesus actually rebuked Peter as we read in Matthew chapter 26, verse 53 and 54. Here Jesus talking to Peter, his disciple, and he says, "Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels?" In the time of Jesus, a standard Roman legion consisted of 6,000 men. So 12 legions would be 72,000 angels. Jesus continues, "How then could the scriptures be fulfilled, that it must happen thus?" So here, clearly Jesus even refers to the prophecies about himself and says to Peter that there must be no defense on his behalf, because the prophecies about him must be fulfilled. Isaiah, over 700 years prior to this event, had prophesied in Isaiah chapter 53, verse 7, "He, that is Jesus, was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth." So, looking at the probability, how many prisoners accused of a capital crime make no defense, even though innocent? Let's be very generous and say 1 in 1,000. In the Gospel of Mark, we read, although Jesus was crucified between two thieves, after he gave up his spirit and was brought down from the cross, a well-known rich man by the name of Joseph of Arimathea asks for Jesus' body and buried him in his own tomb. We see this in Mark chapter 15, verses 43 to 46. Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent council member who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God, coming and taking courage, went in to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Now this event was prophesied in Isaiah chapter 53, verse 9. "And they made his grave with the wicked, but with the rich at his death, because he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth." So how many died among the wicked, yet were buried with the rich? Let's say 1 in 1,000, being generous. And this prophecy is related to Jesus being nailed on the cross, as John records in his Gospel in John chapter 19, verse 23. We read, "Then the soldiers, when they had crucified Jesus." We find this event prophesied in Psalm 22, verse 16, which says this about Jesus on the cross: "For dogs have surrounded me. The congregation of the wicked has enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet." This was such a strange statement because it was written 700 years before crucifixion was invented. So how many, taken at random, having died by having hands and feet pierced? If we say 1 in 1,000, we are saying out of every 1,000 people that die, one person had hands and feet pierced. So 1 in 1,000 is being very generous considering the population of the world. Just an overview to understand the combined probability concept. If we have one die and ask ourselves, what is the probability of throwing this die and getting a 5, let's say, is 1 in 6, because the die has 6 sides. Now, if we have 2 dice and want to find the probability of both dice come up with 5s, is 1/6 times 1/6, which is 1/36. In effect, we multiplied the probabilities to get the composite probability. Now, let's take this one step further. Let's consider we have 100 people where 60% are male and 40% are female. So if we randomly select one person from this population, the chance of getting one female is 40%, or probability is equal to 0.4, or let's say 4 out of 10. Also, let's say that in this 100 people population, 60% of people are right-handed and 40% are left-handed. So the probability of taking someone at random to be left-handed is 40%. Now, what is the probability of selecting a left-handed female at random? So when we put both populations together, what is common between the two is the answer, which is 0.4 times 0.4, or equal to 0.16, or 16%. So again, we multiplied the probabilities to get the composite probability. With that in mind, with our 8 prophecies we reviewed, what is the chance of a particular individual fulfill all these 8 prophecies? If we multiply all probabilities, we get 1 in 10 to the power of 28. To get the combined probability, we have to divide our total probability by total population. This graph from Wikipedia shows a study on world population from 12,000 years ago to now. And you can see that the bulk is just in the last couple of 100 years, as it is now less than 9 billion people we have on Earth. So we assume the total population to be no more than 100 billion, which is 10 to the power of 11. That's plenty. So we divide 10 to the power of 28 by 10 to the power of 11, and we get 10 to the power of 17. So the probability of any one person to fulfill all these 8 prophecies at random is 1 to 10 to the power of 17. To get the idea of the random chance across, let's say for 1 in 100 is that if we have 100 silver dollars and mark one of them, and then mix all of them and create a situation that I can have an equal chance of drawing each one, and I pull one of them out, the chance that the marked silver dollar comes out is 1 in 100. But to grasp the idea of what the number of 10 to the power of 17 means, let's consider the state of Texas. If we cover Texas with dollar coins and keep placing layer over layers until we have 79 layers of these coins, then we have 10 to the power of 17 dollar coins. If we use the area of Iran instead of Texas, with 10 to the power of 17 dollar coins, we can cover Iran with 33 layers of coins. So if we blindfold someone and take that person in a tour and provide a condition in such a way that that person has equal chance to draw any one of these coins, if that person draws the marked coin, that is our chance. That is 1 in 10 to the power of 17. So if we bring in another 8 prophecies, now we have 16 prophecies out of the 300. This next 8 being more specific, with each less likely than previous. But let's assume that the same chance exists for them. So we get 10 to the power of 28 times 10 to the power of 28, which gives us 10 to the power of 56. And to get the combined probability of these 16 prophecies, we divide that by the total population of 100 billion to get 10 to the power of 45. How big is 10 to the power of 45? With the dollar coins, what area can we cover? If we have a ball with the surface area of 10 to the power of 45 coins, what is the radius of that ball, you think? We have the equation for the surface area of a sphere, which is A equal to 4 pi times r squared. We can determine radius r to be 657 quadrillion 918 trillion 107 billion 902 million and 347,000 kilometers. If we wanted to get a feel for the radius of this sphere, we know that the distance from Earth to Sun is 150 million kilometers. If we divide the radius of that sphere by the distance between Earth to Sun, we get 4,386,120,719. That is how large this sphere is, which is beyond what my mind can comprehend. So if we cover the surface of such a sphere with dollar coins and have an astronaut to go all around it in a space to pick a coin at random, if he picks the one that is marked, the chance for this to happen is 1 in 10 to the power of 45. That is a chance of having 16 prophecies come true on one particular individual. So going back to 8 prophecies, we saw that the probability was 10 to the power of 28. If now instead of 8 we consider 7 times 8 or 56 prophecies, we get 10 to the power of 7 times 28, which is 196. And for the combined probability with the total population of 100 billion, which is 10 to the power of 11, we divide the 10 to the power of 196 by 10 to the power of 11, and we get 10 to the power of 185. To understand the magnitude of this number, dollar coins won't work anymore. Google tells us that as of August 8, 2019, scientists have agreed that there is 10 to the power of 80 atoms in the universe. Now imagine we bring all these atoms into one gigantic ball. So this ball is made of 10 to the power of 80 atoms. Now consider for each atom in this ball, we make a ball that is the size of the universe. So now we have 10 to the power of 160 atoms. When we compare with our number, which is 10 to the power of 185, we are still way short. We are still short by 10 to the power of 25. Doesn't this tell us that we should take the Bible more seriously? So just a quick review. If we make a ball from all atoms in the universe, we get 10 to the power of 80. Now for every atom in this ball, if we make another ball the size of the universe, and we put all these balls together, we get 10 to the power of 80 times 10 to the power of 80, which is 10 to the power of 160. That's the number of atoms. If we believe that the Planck Space Observatory measurements are correct, the universe is between 13.79 and 13.82 billion years old. Now multiply 13.82 billion years by 31,556,952 seconds per year, and it should equal 436 quadrillion, 117 trillion, 76 billion, and 600 million seconds. Now if we round up and just say 500 quadrillion, or 5 times 10 to the power of 17. Even if we double this number, I get 10 times 10 to the power of 17, which is 10 to the power of 18. In the previous exercise, we said for every atom in the universe, if we make a ball the size of the universe, we get 10 to the power of 160. Even if we repeat the above exercise every second since universe began, we end up with 10 to the power of 160 times 10 to the power of 18, which gives us 10 to the power of 178. Comparing 10 to the power of 178 with our probability of 10 to the power of 185, we're still short. By how much? By 10 million times. So that is a larger concept that we can ever get our minds around. And we have only dealt with the 56 out of over 300 prophecies. So the only conclusion these probabilities tell us is that we should be more confident that Jesus is the Messiah and He is who the Bible says He is. And we should be more certain of this than any other fact in the universe, including our own names. Are you able to see that beyond the accuracy of the calculations, there is a higher point in all of this? That God gives us ample evidence to trust Him, rather than expecting us to determine the exact numerical value of the probability analysis? For example, in the 18th chapter of Gospel of Matthew, we learn as Peter, one of Jesus' followers, wanted to know how many times should he forgive another follower. As we read in verse 21, "Then Peter came to him," that is to Jesus, "and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Then we read in verse 22, Jesus said to him, I don't say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Well, we know 70 times 7 is 490. But do you think that Jesus was telling Peter, start counting every time you forgive that person till you reach the number 490? Of course not. Jesus was teaching the concept that in forgiving someone, we shouldn't keep scores, because unforgiveness pollutes our own heart with grudge and bitterness. Similarly, the point of these analyses is to demonstrate how much we can trust Jesus of the Bible. So, as we mentioned in the beginning of this program, regarding Jesus' first coming, we have over 300 prophecies in the Old Testament. The New Testament part of the Bible includes all the writers that either were actually with Jesus as eyewitnesses or interviewed these eyewitnesses directly, and they all finished their writings in the 1st century. But regarding Jesus' second coming, did you know that we have over 1,800 references in the Old Testament, as well as 318 in the New Testament? So altogether we have 2163 references in the Bible for Jesus' second coming. That means for every prophecy in the Bible about his first coming, there are more than 7 references regarding Jesus' second coming. The probability analysis here showed the certainty of Jesus' first coming. For his second coming, we can be 7 times more certain that Jesus will indeed return. Does these make sense to those who look to science and math for realistic answers? God of the Bible has told us in Isaiah 44, verse 6, I am the first and I am the last. Here he is referring to his eternal and everlasting nature, one that is outside of time continuum. God continues in verse 24 and says, I am the Lord, the maker of all things, who stretches out the heavens, who spreads out the earth by myself. So he points to himself as the causing agent for creation. That is the dimensions of space, time, matter, and energy. Because he is transcendent, he knows the end from the beginning, and he tells us in Isaiah chapter 42, verse 8, I am Jehovah. This is my name. For those who may not know, Jehovah or Yahweh is the Creator's personal name, as he wishes to have a personal relationship with every one of us individually. God continues in verse 9, Behold, the former things are come to pass, and new things do I declare. Before they spring forth, I tell you of them. Could he be any more clear as how willing he is to keep us in the loop with the world events? For those of you who like to further investigate the God of the Bible, I suggest you study his word. You can download reputable Bible apps like YouVersion that has English as well as other languages, including Persian or Farsi, and study this amazing gift of salvation he has given us. You can also join a Bible teaching church. If it is not possible for you, consider viewing the videos on this channel to address your concerns, such as, is the Bible distorted? Or if you do not know the Jesus that Bible speaks of, you can watch the video entitled, Who is Jesus of the Bible? Until next program, may you keep searching for the truth and find it, and in doing so, may you be blessed beyond time and space. Our final word in this program is from Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 13, in which God says to us, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." His blessings be to you and to your loved ones. Goodbye.